Now we have Dan. Dan Taylor is here. Just a moment. Let me add him to the stream. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how you doing, Spear?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Okay, so are you ready? I'm giving you the floor, and it's your audience.
Thank you. Do I just share the screen and good to go?
Yep. Just share the screen, and I will help you to share it with the audience.
Thank you. I should be sharing now.
Okay. Yep. Here it is.
How do I make this go full screen?
There should be present. You see, there is present. Present button in the right corner. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really don't need slides enough.
Okay, cool. Good luck.
So hi everyone, thank you for having me as well. Just thank you to Purdy and the team for inviting me along to this at the end of February. I think we're all in need of a distraction from the world, so hopefully this is proving to be a good evening or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. So as Sophia said, my name is Dan Taylor. I'm head of research and development at Salt Agency. We're a UK-based technical SEO house, mainly predominantly based in Leeds, but we have offices down in London and also in Boston in the US as well. A little bit of background about me. 2018, I won the inaugural Tech SEO Boost Innovation Award backed by Moz for working at Edge SEO. I write for Search Engine Journal across a lot of their international and technical SEO guides. I'm in their top 140 list. I've also written quite a lot for SEMrush and SEMrush Academy in the past. I've included just a few kind of sites so you can check out some of the free tools and articles I've written, and also all these slides are available right now on a blog on my site at dantaylor.online/Plurdy, as well as via SlideShare and obviously via this rewatch link afterwards. So what I'm going to talk about today is Google's relationship with user experience, and not so much user experience in terms of trying to increase conversions, increase user clicks, increase navigations, but actually how Google over the past decade has really started to factor user experience mechanisms as both hard and soft ranking factors, which ultimately help create performance and go through to ranking in that sense. So I'm going to go over an analysis of anything that Google's kind of said directly in patents and any kind of documentation around UX elements, but also mainly how the algorithms introduced have moved Google more towards that single objective of user intent satisfaction, which comes from positive user web experiences and not just the web experience and user experience of a specific landing page or page itself. I've also done some deep dives into a lot of stuff that Messrs. Mueller and Ilias have said, and more recently Mr. Split, as well as just summaries of tests, but also how the new Core Web Vitals ties in to user experience and a concept which I'm going to cover a lot, which I've called user happiness and user happiness ratings. So why would UX matter to Google? And the simple answer behind that is like these are an advancement beyond the traditional keywords and links that 15, 16 years ago we'd be able to fire up XRumor, point a few hundred links at something, use Unique Article Wizard, spin an article on jeans 500 times, wait for the Google dance at the end of a month, and see where we landed. Unfortunately, since caffeine and the indexing process sped up, it's become a lot more enhanced, and the user expectations and journeys have enhanced with that. So for me, and this one's quote from me kind of self-satisfyingly, is that user experience isn't just about how well presented the page is. It's how easy it is to navigate, how easy it is to filter, how easy it is to find content. That isn't just what UX matters to Google. It's about how it makes the user feel in terms of the satisfaction, and also a concept I'm going to talk about, page enthusiasm, but also the experiences of how that actual experience manifests itself within the behavior of a user, returning to search query pages, stacking queries, refining queries, or just clicking on other results. But because Google's main goal around search is the happiness element, because we all know that search as a product does not make Google any money at all. What makes Google money is the ads element, And people will only return and perform consistent searches if the search product provides happiness, so they can provide ads and ad impressions and gain revenue that way. So before I go into actual UX, it's important to understand where UX falls into the spectrum of how Google actually works. So Google's process up until the dawn of JavaScript was relatively simple. It crawled a website, indexed a website, and then eventually ranked a website. Now with JavaScript, it has a render process in it in which it will crawl the site. It will discover as much as it can through plain HTML. Then it will discover there's elements hidden by JavaScript. So it will bring in the web rendering service as a secondary crawl mechanism, recrawl the page, render everything, and then essentially pass the data back to the initial crawler and move through to indexing. And once everything's indexed, they score it, weight it, and tag it in the various shard system they have. So that way, when someone performs a query, it can rank them based on the pre-judged scoring mechanisms already done, and also any augmented queries it already has. So with the web rendering process, it also has to take into account the page layout, content visibility, the pop-up adverts, any intrusive or interstitials, and anything like that also factors into things. We know that Google introduced an algorithm in around 2016 which tackled intrusive and obtrusive adverts and pop-ups that covered high percentages of the screen. And essentially, it kind of boils down to what I call design time versus time to query satisfaction. It's okay having a page which is very well optimized with really good content, but frustrates the users. A good example of this at the moment potentially is anytime you try to Google a recipe where you will land on a page for how to boil an egg, but you first have to read 500 words of how the egg made the author feel and how the egg has some sympathetic tie to their dear grandma before you actually get to the answer itself. Similarly, news websites have taken this approach, and it's understandable when you're just looking for short information that they want to increase time on site through some thought process that time on site recording in Google Analytics will impact their rankings, but also they want to increase scroll and therefore impressions on adverts. So this for me is also why in modern times Google has started passage indexing websites and bringing users to that information more quickly, because we've ultimately just made it harder to find the answer on the page. So Google's combating it in that way. So with regards to metrics, and I've already kind of poo-pooed on the average session duration thing, I'm not going to be talking about things like bounce rate, pages per session, or average session duration. We know that Google does not use metrics out of Google Analytics. Google Analytics, for the most part, is a highly adaptable and amenable solution. In fact, that if you want to reduce your bounce rate, you can introduce a scroll trigger goal, which will ping the server a second time, therefore reduce the bounce rate by analytics definition. Google does, however, use Chrome user experience data, so CRUX. It uses real-time user monitoring RUM, and also monitors SERP interactions over billions of user touch points and actively runs experiments around that. If you want to read or listen to more about the user experiment stuff, I recommend Paul Haar's Google Engineer story from SMX 2016, which is a highly plausible video on the matter and explains how their testing process works. But essentially, once we can use analytics to optimize campaigns, it's a very, very small window into the data that Google will be processing around this. And unfortunately, we can't mimic that, just use the sheer computing power and velocity of data that they have. So given that I'm not going to be talking about those metrics, how do we actually quantitate this then? Because we know that getting investment for development, investment for anything in terms of SEO often has the question around ROI attached to it. So we know from patent analysis that Google has its own methods of trying to score how successful elements of a page are. Paul Haar goes into this in his SMX 2016 talk as well, where essentially they score and rank featured snippets based on clicks, based on impressions, based on various other criteria that judges how or whether or not there's a failure within the search itself. But also, how they try to supplement search as well. So this is a quote from Bill Slavsky's SEO by the Sea site, and I'm not going to read all of it, but essentially the key takeaways I've highlighted are that Google may compare individual search results pages for highly similar queries, which is judged as similar based on the entity the query searches for versus the subsequent queries that people search for. For example, if you're searching for what is the soap opera effect, the query before that might be why are the funny lines on my TV. So it's how it does the association with the knowledge base. So what it starts to do is it starts to bring in augmented query results. So you could be doing a search for what came first, the chicken before the egg, and it will give you a main search about chickens because that's the first entity within the result. However, it may think you're talking more about the egg, so it'll actually start to blend search results pages together and augment them based on the data it has behind it. So when we start looking at search results pages for intent bases, we also need to try and at the same point trying to work out how the web pages can create positive user experiences. We also then need to start thinking about how those search results pages might be a manufactured combination of different searches, well, different SERPs themselves combined based around highly similar topics and queries and not just linear on that single keyword. And the main objective with this, what they say, when highlighted, is they do this to try and improve the overall quality score. Now, in the quality rated guidelines, this is the needs met rating and the needs met guidelines, whether or not a search results page strongly meets or doesn't meet a user query intent. So they will do this experiment rather than just do a straight linear, here's the SERP, let's move around the top 100, they will blend. So this concept of user happiness, which Google looks at in terms of user experience and user experimentation, is the fact that it has just evolved beyond matching up keywords, the old allergies of keyword frequencies, number of links, which Google have now come out and said that the total number of links doesn't actually matter too much in the grand scheme of things. And we talk about strategies with link building, the new phase of digital PR, meticulously planning out content hubs and using topic analysis, but ultimately we're working towards two things for a business, and that's the initial user happiness, which Google is also working towards, and that's the part that it cares about in terms of positive user experiences and positive search experiences. But also the secondary objective that we have is we need to create positive user experience forecasting. So this is the ability for our content and our web experience to not only make it easier for the user to convert, for them to find the right size shoe or the right size shirt, but for more complex products, travel, SaaS, even automobile parts, it's their ability from the content and the variables we both can and can't control for them to be able to forecast their experience with our product, with our service, and with our company. Now, a positive user experience forecast will oftentimes lead in a conversion. An extremely positive experience forecast means the user can accurately forecast their experience, meaning over time they will become repeat customers, increasing their LTV, their lifetime value. Their churn rate will be a lot less because they accurately forecast their experience initially, and the service delivery has met up to that. And that also means that overall, their actual cost per acquisition over a longer period of time will decrease. So the actual ROI from individual users and conversions will become higher. The other thing we need to think about with how Google treats user experience is the concept around user enthusiasm. And that essentially is creating the enthusiasm around the brand, where we start to have brand search come into things. And the best example of this that I've ever come across is the fact when you go to most restaurants and they'll turn around and go, oh, can I have a Coke? And they go, is Pepsi okay? That instantly sets the standard for the user enthusiasm. The enthusiasm was around the Coke, but now associated with the Pepsi side. Pepsi's basically fighting for the secondary experience gap. So one note on data I've seen over the past year in relation to this, now with a lot of organic search data, COVID has obliterated any kind of data analysis just because of the increase. However, Rob Tannen wrote a really good piece, which I agree on. And in terms of user experience data, if anything, the data we've had over the past year will be better than any of the data we've had previously. And that's because more users have had their offline journeys forced online, but also because of the standards being set by websites like Amazon, Wildberries, Ozone, etc., and how their experiences are and processes are, the expectations of the general internet have increased. And unfortunately, we have to almost compete with those benchmarks of expectation when it comes to both user happiness and experience forecasting in terms of products and services themselves. So let's go through the patents and algorithms in a more tangible way as to how Google's trying to achieve this. So with patents, and being honest, in a single patent format, Google has never directly created a binary metric or system for determining what is or isn't a negative or positive user experience. They have, however, over the years, introduced multiple scoring patents and ways of judging and scoring different search elements through, and also taking data through tests with various models of data modification they have to try and better understand what is a positive website in terms of what people want to see versus the click-through data from search results pages and the various data they receive from there. Now, over the years when algorithm updates come out, we've oftentimes been heavily siloed and focused on the tangible element of what that update has done in there and then. And that's rational because we've had clients, we've had websites, and ultimately we live in the here and now. So if the wind is blowing left, we have to adjust the sail. However, looking back with hindsight, being wonderful, we can see that the changes in wind direction being made by Google have been to try and get our website from A to B in a specific way. And that's how they've been trying to improve websites through their own data analysis and understanding of creating positive web experiences. Because back to point one, Google only makes money from people searching. Search is a free product that they don't make any money from, but they still have to have positive search results. If the entire internet was bad and websites were bad, people would search less, their bottom line would go down. If they can help increase the overall quality of the internet and increase the satisfaction levels of websites, ultimately it's self-serving and it makes them more money. So the first one I'm going to look at was Panda back in 2011. Now, when Panda first came out, I know Panda has oftentimes just been associated with just being about content. However, it was the first real update that started to tangibly move websites as a document, web page itself, not just thinking about backlink manipulation, towards a better standard of user experience. So we took this away and started looking at things like minimum word counts. We also brought up ideas from the 80s again, like TF, ITF, and LSI, neither of which are used by Google, haven't been used by Google for decades, but we got Panda coming out at the same time as the knowledge graph came out in 2012, and we started to map things together, cross wires, and ultimately we started calling things by incorrect names. But essentially with Panda, we all started going 500 words on the page, let's do 300 words, and we created a system of minimum word counts. So then from there we worked that way, but in reality Panda was there to try and demote low value, spammy, spun, copied, stolen, bad content, which generally made the internet bad. The good content, no matter how long or short, did survive, but again, as a tangible method of trying to do this, we try to increase content length because it's something we could measure. 2012, like I said, was the implementation of the knowledge graph, and in 2013 came Hummingbird, which was essentially, as it says, designed to help Google better understand intent and context behind searches, which was one of the first steps in semantic search. So with semantics not just being around colloquialisms and word phrases, but the actual starting to form relationships between entities, both of high class and subclass, as well as different contexts. As the internet was growing, as people were introducing more and more ambiguous queries and more like really weird, strange things into Google for the first time, this was really a mechanism of trying to actually serve results, because Google still today receives queries it's never seen before. Now, if that's your first experience of really using Google or your limited experience, that's a negative experience. And again, Google makes money from repeat searches or increased repeat searches so they can show more ads. The more people search for something, the more likely people are going to bid on it. Again, it's that cycle of money making. So Hummingbird, also to note, was the first indication of Google using natural language processing to start identifying black hat techniques, but also to start moving towards a more personalized search result based on user history, cookie drop, and other data points. Now, the personal search bubble does exist, but its impact, being honest, isn't as whole scale as what I've seen and experienced. But around a lot of specific niches, and especially around Google Discover, it is quite powerful. Not much further on from there, the concept of EAT was actually introduced in 2014. Jennifer Slegg of Search Engine, SE Post even, was one of the first people to start writing about this. And essentially, we all know EAT kind of then rose to popularity in 2018, but it was around for a number of years before then. And Google's original guidelines around it haven't changed too much. But again, this was Google trying to make a step in that direction again of improving experience. And improving experience comes from having content showing expertise and knowledge, but focused and written by credible and authorities within that sector. So you won't come to me for medical advice, but you go to a doctor, quite rightly. Google's had to try and make that step as well. Also around the overall quality of a site, so that's the structure, so there encompasses your navigation ability, content discoverability, internal linking, how users can navigate between associated topics, but also the security of the site as well. And then also, he started talking about the actual offsite in here as well. And this is where I've said about enthusiasm generation, because we oftentimes start looking at link building, digital PR, and everything as oh great, we've had placements in XYZ, or we've had opportunities to see, which is PR figure OTS of 1.3 million eyes, or we've had links on 90 websites. But what we actually want to start doing is creating enthusiasm within the user base, which Google can tangibly see through things like the Twitter Fire Hose deal, through people writing about you on the internet, and it can start to actually build up this basis of, well, maybe this is a brand I should take seriously, and then through the knowledge graph, combine with the entities and content vectors around it. Similarly as well, we have the mobile changes to Mobilegeddon that came around, and then also further advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, just to basically help improve the experience of the web, handle queries that haven't previously been seen before, but also to better match user behavior, user devices. So it drives the best experience, because we know that a lot of people mainly say, well, Google's imagination was that people started searching more on mobile for everything. So it'll use heavily use the mobile user agent versus desktop user agent for basically all queries. And we've made that movement over. And then advancements, like I said, in machine learning around BERT, Ernie, Yati within Yandex as well. Just basically our search engines in Google to serve better content that matches the ambiguous queries, but also help to match better answers to queries where people don't really know what the questions they're asking. But again, it's search experience, it's user experience, and how we can cater for it. So touching on that with Core Web Vitals, then we know that in May this year, it's going to become a ranking factor. They effectively are a statement, like I said, on rewarding websites that generate positive user experiences, and Google are quantitatively measuring that in those three methods of being the FCP, FID, and CLS. From what I've seen and discussions I've had, I believe it's going to be an evolution, not a revolution, because it's unlikely that a large percentage of search results pages will see changes. However, as Google works, we know that search results pages for queries that have a much higher search volume than others get more eyes, because Google focuses again on the majority where searches go and not the overall or the minority. So they'll likely see the biggest impact, which means in third-party tools that use either a Markov model or some sort of chain to estimate traffic or visibility, you'll see lots of fluctuations and percentage changes in there. But in reality, to the actual overall bottom line these sites may see, might not be that much because it's done by query and SERP level. And this is one thing I think a lot of people have missed out on. Because it's done by query and SERP level, we should be paying attention to who ranks, or basically the SERPs, and who else ranks for the queries that we hold dear and have the most commercial value on, but then also see if they're making improvements and modifying it. Because at the end of the day, if you've got a brand and you've become known or you've ranked for a long period of time for specific queries, Google's going to have an association between you and those queries. Now, it's not going to just remove the top 10 because it's got loads of other data points which have previously helped tell Google these are the top 10 to show. Now, if number 9 has massively improved their website experience, they could see some improvements. But if the top 3 have relatively stayed the same, they're not great, but at the same point, they're not taking eons to load, and it's not overly that bad, will we see much change? And the answer is potentially not. We're only as fast or as slow as the slowest competitor, and as long as you can be faster than them, show better experience, and plus the fact in all the other factors, there might not be that much disruption. Now, it's in sectors which have just been neglected or ignored in terms of this, they'll see the biggest turnover, but generally being prepared should be okay. So again, I've just included some more information on how the actual overall update will be, because it's not just about the LCP, FID, and CLS, but again, Google's factoring the experience into the page experience update, as you'd imagine, but it's for mobile friendliness, it's safe browsing, it's for HTTPS, it's the institutionals, it's everything that Google's spoken about for the past 7-8 years. The already known factors, the already known everything else, it's just maybe a slight reevaluation that will change for a new web standard, and it's a new web standard that will be set by the fastest out there and by the data out there. Google won't set an obnoxiously high target when no one else on the internet is meeting that target, because they still have to return results and they still have to satisfy user intent. So just some resources on Controllable Vitals there. Again, all these slides are on my site live at the moment, so no need to rush and run down. So when we come to the actual Google statements, I'll actually look at what they've said, and I've kept the exact same black text in there because I forgot to change that. So let's just move on from there. So Google do have UX Playbooks. They've publicly stated that they have them internally, but they're used by the Google Ads team, and they're more or less a chronicle of best practices, which they'll hold landing pages and other data points too. Now, we know that landing pages go for evaluation with the paid search teams. However, in 2018, they were leaked, and we got to have a glimpse of essentially what makes an e-commerce page good for conversion, or Google for XYZ from certain data points was. But again, Mueller, then in direct response to these, kind of started talking about the concept of soft ranking factors and indirect ranking factors versus just because it's a tick box, it's verbatim, because not all tick boxes are made equal when it comes to Google evaluation. That's backwards. So the way he kind of phrased it was, obviously, if you make a good website that works well for users, and indirectly you can see the effect on ranking. So he basically wanted people to not just look at the UX playbooks, I think, in the same way that people looked at the quality rating guidelines and started treating them like gospel, and started thinking, well, this is what the quality rating guideline says, so therefore it must be true, because they're just a guideline for a strategic playbook on how to work. And similarly, from what we've seen with these playbooks as well, generally we were trying to get e-commerce websites to do this anyway, or we were getting other websites to do this, because it's just basics of good design, good UX, and anyone who's run a Hotjar account can tell you half the stuff they said. So this is where, again, we talk about the soft ranking factors. So this is what a lot of user experience factors have been classed as by Google. For example, speed and HTTPS are soft factors, but they're less impactful than other regular ones. So we know with speed, that's subjective. In extreme examples, we know that speed can make or break a website, and a very, very slow site will struggle to rank for very high competitive queries when the competitive cohort is faster. Similarly with HTTPS, it doesn't directly affect rankings. However, in a modern world, it's being used as a tiebreaker. Now, with a page experience update, I kind of feel we've probably reached that stage where Google's been probably banging on the HTTPS and security drum now for a good 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. I think with a page experience update, it's going to come to a point where they actually turn around and go, do you know what, you've had 5, 6 years to move on to HTTPS. SSL certificates aren't expensive. It's part of the modern web. Here's the boat. You're either on it or you're not. And I think that's going to be a more impactful factor that we're going to see. Similarly with things like the mobile experience update. I think it's 5 years since Mobilegeddon. And it's been, 3 years since mobile first indexing started rolling out. Again, I think this is going to be a more harsh, if your name's not down, you're not coming in terms of mobile responsiveness and competitiveness and ranking. So, looking again, UX being this. So, during 2019 in a Webmaster Hangout, someone asked a question around a website just being as you'd expect. It loads very fast. It's got high levels of keyword optimization, but didn't actually match the user intent or query adequately. It was just one of these very high spun sites just to try and get the traffic in or get a conversion. And this is again just Google responding again with direct. The user will be happy. So again, they're not so much talking about performance of the site, they're talking about the user satisfaction of the site. Now, it is worth noting as well that soft factors can outweigh the more rigid factors if the satisfaction isn't high overall. So you can have a very perfectly fast, technically 100% website. You can have keywords in your title tags, your H1s, you can have content written by high authority, but if you don't answer the fundamental questions of the queries and intents, it's just not going to rank over time. You might see it rank, and then it'll probably drop like a stone as Google collects more user data and actually starts to get the judgment of actually this isn't something I should be promoting high prominently as we are. So just touching on brand, I mentioned earlier, and obviously there's a lot about brand search and brand SEO at the moment. So 2 key quotes for me are from earlier days of Google. And first one from Eric Schmidt, being that brands are a solution, not a problem, and they're how you support, and brands are how you sort out the cesspool. So again, this kind of comes down to an adage I've always had, like genuine businesses and genuine companies do some form of marketing, do some form of public relations, or just ultimately make some sort of noise to do customer acquisition, not just through organic search, but just survival and just genuinely making noise out there as a business. Now, fake websites don't. So trying to get that understanding that marketing isn't just, or activity shouldn't just be in a silo for certain channels, Google started looking at that. And then when Matt Cutts reaffirmed this, I think a year later, they have the classifier where they look at things like IRS, Wikipedia, or the New York Times, and they start to judge quality and low quality based on almost brand gravitas, an intangible element that you can't really do. We can see it in brand search and brand search volumes, but it's an intangible element that we can't really do through SEO, but we can through noise and enthusiasm generation. So just conscious of time around these, and I've got no idea how many slides I've got left. So on page design itself and effects on speed, essentially speed has a very strong play within user experience, and there's always a study. There's always going to be a study that shows that improving page speed by X actually increases to an increase in sales of Y, an increase of leads in Z, but we focus too much on that in silo. We oftentimes focus too much on tools like Lighthouse, and we don't actually get out our phones or go on we probably do it more now, but we're all working from home, but we don't just go on our website and do the journey and use it and see how things load. I work with a OTA, and they actually found that when people refined or refreshed search results, it happened within less than a second, and it updated the page. However, the human brain wasn't computing that, so they just kept hitting refresh because they weren't convinced it was actually refreshing. So they did a forced loading screen for 3 seconds every single time, And then afterwards, it just said it. There was nothing changed, just a 3-second little spinny circle. Users converted more because they actually saw something happening. So it's also a combination of speed. Being too fast sometimes actually leads to negative because users can't perceive their action has been recognized. Because what we also have to remember is that a lot of people who go on our websites aren't likely going to be as tech savvy as us, who analyze it and make use of it. One of my beta tests is I get my dad to try and use a website. And my general consensus is if my dad can use it, then usually it's a half decent website, because just getting him to turn a laptop on is often a struggle. And again, similarly, it's just about loading times, everything else. The old adage is obviously a restaurant. Now, the restaurant could be very well optimized, it could have great seats, great food, but if the service is slow, it's a negative experience. And again, it's that speed, not only for loading, but speed to intent satisfaction. Again, Google 11 years ago now, back when Meili Oye, I'm never going to be able to say that name, apologies Meili, but they actually had a benchmark within Google that even though at the time Akamai were leading in terms of studies in this area, Google wanted a loading threshold of under half a second, and that was the figure they were trying to go for 11 years ago. Again, now we typically say 3, and we know that a lot of Google tools now start benchmarking versus other sites for more realism. But again, this goes back to Google's not going to set an unrealistic benchmark versus what the internet can actually do. So again, with crawling and how it goes down to technical, just from a general SEO perspective, if you genuinely takes over 2 seconds for Google to fetch your URL, it could limit the amount of crawls your site gets. And we know that crawling isn't directly affected to ranking, but ultimately the process is crawl, index, rank. Without the crawl or sufficient crawling, you're not going to get enough content updates in there, and you're not going to be able to be indexed fast enough to potentially rank as quickly as you can. So there's opportunity costs in that process. So the final section I want to cover over is, so it's great understanding this, understanding how criteria has changed, but generally speaking, you're going to go away from this conference and the question that someone might ask is, right, what can we do? What can we take away from it? Your C-suite will be grateful that you gain knowledge, but ultimately, what can you do to implement it? So one thing I want you to take away from this mainly is this concept of user happiness. And again, it's like I've said previously, it's the initial user happiness versus the user experience forecasting. Yep, this is a duplicate slide from earlier, but again, I want you to reiterate. And the focus around that is to stop focusing on the funnel. Now, the funnel, well, as we talk about sales, we'll talk about top of the funnel keywords, bottom of the funnel keywords, and how intent will change from someone just researching to ready to convert intent and all the joys that go with that. And that's great because we can start showing clients how we're actually trying to focus at different stages for both brand awareness all the way through to conversion. But I hate the funnel. For me, the funnel's too rigid. The funnel suggests that once the user's converted, it's job done. That's it. Marketing's done. We've got the money in the back pocket. Let's applaud ourselves. Let's go. And we don't ask the question, what next? We focus too much on the ROI, not only of SEO, but other activities, and not the user happiness element. And the user happiness element can help expand things out. So that's why, rather than the funnel, I look at the bow tie. Now, it's basically the funnel on the left side, which is exactly the same funnel we have now. And we look at things like the ROI and cost per acquisition of users, and they get through to conversion. And we achieve this through creating better experience forecasts. In focus groups I do with clients, I turn around to them and say, right, I want you to imagine you are in a hotel in a sunny country. Most of the time, people will come back to me in these focus groups and say they've just imagined a large building, often white coloured or light coloured. There'll be balconies, and there'll probably be a pool or some form of bar. That's because variables of the internet and the world have told us that that's what to expect. Now, we have to deal with those variables on that side of the funnel and also compete. Now, the right side of the funnel, after someone's converted, we always see this in marketing textbooks and in marketing things, and it's great, but ultimately this comes down to user happiness. And this is the lifetime value and churn rate. Now, churn does go back to experience forecasting, like I've said previously, but it's how we can better address existing customer needs and prevent the competition from essentially ranking for stuff which we could answer and prevent the customer getting a foot in the door. This is protectionism, a prevention and protection of revenue and the hard work you've already done. You don't herd all of the sheep to leave the gate open at night, kind of analogy. So with that as well, on the right-hand side of the funnel post-conversion, we can control so many more variables because pre-conversion, we're competing against the messaging of competitors, the false promises, the snake oil, everything that you're doing when you're trying to win that actual customer. There's so much out of your control. Someone might watch a television show and have their expectations set incorrectly for something. We can't control that. All we can do is play in that loud cacophony of noise and try and get the acquisition. Post-conversion, we can control all the variables. We can control everything. If we know that users have a certain pain point, let's stick a support article up and prevent someone else from doing it, or prevent the user potentially going, oh, the tool doesn't do this. Google it. Oh, the competition tool does this because they've included the keyword and Google's had to factor it. Competition's got a foot in the door. A good example of this is the band Pearl Jam, who I believe it was between 2001 and 2002 took the attitude that trying to compete with modern music and modern downloads and all that on the left-hand side was difficult. So in that year period, they released 72 albums purely to existing customers. All the albums made profit because they knew they had a small section of pre-converted users who they could just go and sell to at much lower cost per acquisition rather than trying to compete with whoever else was around in the early 2000s. I don't know, Spice Girls maybe. So again, it's the concept of moving beyond intent, the forecasting and the happiness. You need to just make sure that the content gives initial happiness, users will stay on the page, they'll pass on positive signals towards Google. Well, then post-happiness as well, post-conversion even, is creating the happiness, maintaining it, and effectively shutting the door on competition and stopping them from sneaking in. So my final thing is I do appreciate I'm short on time, sorry Sphere, is just a real world example of this, and that's actually chess. So in November 2020, like you state, we've got the the US search volume for chess doubled. It was 100% year on year, 100% month on month. In terms of the past 5 years, it was an anomaly. And the reason why? Because Netflix released a series of Queen's Gambit. Now, if your left side of the funnel is strong, like chess.com, the Sicilian.com, all those will have, because that's been their market for years, but their market's just doubled. That left-hand side of the funnel should be working. Their challenge is the right-hand side of the funnel and trying to maintain that level of user happiness with retention. And the way they do that is by secondary queries, tertiary queries, almost going back to the top of the funnel but changing it to what a pre-converted user would search for and looking for attention in that way. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I'm hoping that people found value from that, and I'm going to hand back over to Sophia because I believe I may have run over slightly. Sorry.
Okay, all good then. Thank you so much for the presentation. Honestly, we have lots of questions from our attendees, but we are just running a little bit out of time. So I will just read out one comment that we have. So the person says, "Thank you for that Google criteria evolution. It's great to understand the way search engine updates evolved and how we can try to keep our website updated." So then I'm sure this information was extremely useful for our listeners right now, and plus there will be a recorded version. So, and you will see the questions in the commentaries. If you have time, you can always put the answer there.
No problem. Thank you for having me, Sophia.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.